So let's go ahead and get into the fabric for this project. You want to pick a really nice light to mid-weight faux leather or any kind of vinyl fabric. In this case, I'm going to be using this amazing sleek PVC fabric. This is a version of a faux leather, and it has a fairly lightweight hand, but it still works for jackets and pants or any kind of coat or bottom weight. For the lining, I'm going to be using this really amazing black sparkly cotton fabric that I found. Usually you can use anything that's silky and smooth for a lining, but you know, you also want to make things a little bit easy on yourself. If this is your first time working with lining fabric, you could just make it super easy and just use a cotton like I am here. I'm using a cotton because I couldn't resist this sparkly effect, and I think it'll look really cool underneath this red on the inside. So I'm going to move forward with this choice. Let's go ahead and talk about the other tools that you're going to need to sew and cut your fabric. First off, a good assortment of sewing machine needles. I have a package of universal needles, a package of Microtex, and a package of stretch needles. You want to test these out on your fabric first before you sew on your actual project to make sure that everything is good. I will probably start with the Microtex needle, and this will probably take me through the entire project, honestly. You can sometimes use a Microtex needle depending on the weight of the fabric. And since I'm sewing with something that's very sticky, like this PVC fabric, this will just help to punch through all of the layers. But sometimes you can get away with using a universal needle, depending on, again, the fabric. And sometimes even you may even find that you need to use a stretch needle. Another thing you'll need are pins when you're working with your lining. And when you're working with your leather, you're going to want to use Wonder Clips. You never, ever want to pin into faux leather unless it's within the seam allowance, or if you know that your leather doesn't get holes in it, which is very rare, honestly. So it's best just to stick with Wonder Clips. And an even more important thing that you're going to want to look into are the non-stick or Teflon feet for your machine. I have my foot 53 here, which is for a single needle straight stitch. And I also have my 52D foot. You can do straight stitch and zigzag, and it also has the cutout for the dual feed. There are other versions of these feet available. For zippers, you can get your hands on a 54 foot, and this allows you to sew on zippers on leathers, and it also has an adjustable guide that actually slides in and out. You can get perfect stitching. And again, you want to test these out on your fabric to make sure that they're going to glide and do everything that you need them to do to be able to not get caught up on your leather. So you're going to need some really good thread. This is the thread that I like to use. It is by Gutermann, and the really cool thing about these is they sell them in these jumbo spools, and I find that I use black and red thread a lot. So yeah, just make sure that you're using a good thread, because believe it or not using good thread can affect your stitching in ways that you probably wouldn't have thought. A rotary cutter and a rotary cutting mat. So this will just make it nice and easy to cut all of your fabric. And another thing that you'll need too is a black ink pen. This is so that you can trace all of your pattern pieces onto the wrong side of your leather and be able to cut it. Because when working with any kind of vinyl or faux leather, you are going to use some kind of a marking utensil to trace your patterns onto the wrong side, so that way you can be able to cut them out and not have any pinholes in your leather. If you don't plan on hemming your skirt by machine, you want to go ahead and pick up a roll of this Aleene's Fabric Fusion tape. This works really well for fabric and especially for faux leather and vinyl. This is what I am going to be using to hem my skirt and to make sure that it stays up and doesn't come undone. And for your reference, this is what the packaging looks like. I had already opened mine, but this is what it looks like. You can get this online. So with that, you're going to take your leather and your lining, and you're going to lay them out and cut your patterns. Make sure that you keep in mind which pieces you are going to cut from leather and which ones you are going to cut from lining. In my case, I am cutting a full set of both vinyl and lining for all pieces except for the waistband. The waistband will only be cut in the leather fabric. Now for cutting out, I am not going to show this on camera, but there will be a link in the blog post that will take you to a previous post where I wrote about the process of working with faux leather. In that post, I talk a little bit about how I trace my patterns and cut them using a rotary cutter. Please reference that post when it comes to cutting out your faux leather. Once you have referenced the post and you have cut all of your leather and your lining, go ahead and come back so we can start sewing. After you cut your fabric, you should always take the time to transfer your markings, and in this case, I only had to transfer my notch markings, so go ahead and make sure that you have all of your notches marked, and then we can go ahead and move forward. With that being said, we are going to put our lining aside for a second, and we're going to work with our self or our fashion fabric. When I'm working with vinyl or any kind of faux leather or leather, you want to go ahead and use wonder clips. These are just quilting clips in essence, and you can get these at your local fabric store, and they're pretty easy to find. So let's go ahead and get started. So now, as you can see here, I have the front pieces laid out in front of me. I have my center front panel and my two side front panels. What we're going to do is we are going to sew our princess seams first. So what you're going to do is take one of your side front panels and lay it over the top, right sides facing. The pretty sides of the fabric are touching, and your notches are going to be aligned. You're going to take a few clips, and first I'm going to line up the notch on the bottom of my skirt, place a clip. I'm going to match my hem and place a clip there, and then I am going to match my notches, my second set of notches, and put a clip there, and I'm going to match my top edges and place a clip there. And this will act as your pins to hold everything in place while we're stitching. So I'm going to repeat the process to the other side. And I am going to clip the pieces together where my notches are, making sure that they match. Again, I am going to match my hem lines. And my top edges like so. So now we are good to go to sew these two seams together. You'll notice that on this side, I put the clips with the red side up, and on this side, I put the clips with the clear side up. This is to make it easier so that way we can sew from the hemline all the way to the top on both sides. Repeat this process to the back pieces. So once you have repeated the steps to the back piece and you have those pieces clipped, you're gonna go ahead and do the same thing for your lining pieces. They should be super identical to the outside, if not the same. So what I did is I went ahead, since I'm using just regular woven cotton, I went ahead and just used my pins. In this situation for linings, you can definitely use pins, but never on your vinyl. Once you have both fabrics together and ready, we can go ahead and move to the sewing machine and start stitching. We are now here at the sewing machine, and just a few things before we get started. I have already threaded my machine, and I have inserted a microtex needle into my sewing machine. I am using a size 14 for this project. I also inserted my presser foot. I have chosen to work with 52D after making several tests. I find that this foot was giving me the best result. With this foot, I also am using my dual feed in conjunction with it just to help there be even contact with the fabric as we're sewing and top stitching. Another thing that I have adjusted on my machine is the presser foot pressure. I have it set to number 8, and this will just lessen the pressure that's being put onto the fabric as we are stitching. We are going to begin by stitching our back sections together. So I'm going to line up my fabric with the 1/2 inch mark on my needle plate here. You want to go ahead and make sure that you know the seam allowance that you're working with. I'm going to place my scrap piece of fabric behind the foot as I am here. Another thing you want to keep in mind is these non-stick feet require you to have a piece of fabric underneath it at all times, as you can risk removing the coating from underneath the foot. So I'm going to remove my first clip here and make sure that you are lined up correctly. Make sure that your needle is on your fabric and that you're not going to catch the back piece. And go ahead and start stitching. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And once you're on your fabric, you can go ahead and just remove this for right now and keep stitching until we get to the other side. And you want to be very careful and just make sure that you're pulling out your clips as you come to them. Do not sew that fast. This is not a race. Take your time. You'll sew all the way to the end, back stitch, and then cut your thread. And this is the first seam that we have sewn. So once you have stitched that seam, you're going to repeat the process to the other side back seam. And I'm going to work my way all the way up this seam. So that completes sewing your 3 back pieces together, and now we're going to move forward and do our top stitching. We are going to go ahead and do our top stitching to hold these seam allowances down and keep them nice and flat. The first thing I have done is placed a large sheet of tracing paper on the bed of my sewing machine, and I am going to put my skirt on top like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fingers and open up the seam allowance like this, and I'm going to place my skirt with my seam allowances flat against the tracing paper like so, making sure that they stay nice and flat. Put my presser foot down, and I'm going to go over to my needle position and move it 1 position to the right. So this will be needle position number 1. And then you are going to stitch on the right side of the seam allowance with the seam lined up with the left side of the inside toe of your presser foot. You'll go ahead and start stitching and back stitch. You just want to take a peek underneath and make sure that everything is going to stay nice and flat, and you're going to just continue stitching all the way down to the hemline. And as you can see, if I check underneath, my tracing paper is about to run out here. So what I'm going to do is just tear off a piece of this sheet and lay it underneath like so, and then just continue stitching. And once you reach the end, you'll go ahead and back stitch and cut your thread. And this will complete your first row of top stitching. We're going to go ahead and do the other side. What I'm going to do for that side, I'm going to line up the seam with the inside of the right toe of the presser foot. I'm going to go presser foot down, and I'm going to go to my information button, and I'm going to mirror image the needle position, so that way it is on the left side. So now we are at -1 needle position. I'm going to go ahead and start stitching, back stitching at the beginning, and I'm going to start working my way down the seam again. And again, once you get to the end, back stitch and cut your thread. And this completes your second side of top stitching. And at this point, you can either tear away the tissue paper, or if you have a long enough piece, you can leave it on for the other side. And then you'll want to just go ahead and go in and get rid of the tissue paper that you don't need, especially the ones that are in the center here. And then we can go ahead and move on. You'll do the same thing to the other seam, and then you'll go ahead and repeat this entire process for stitching the seams and top stitching for your front pieces. So let's go ahead and move on and get our side seams sewn. I have my skirt here right side out. This is the front of my skirt, and this is the back of my skirt. I am going to be putting my zipper in the right side. So if I was looking straight at the skirt right side out like this, the zipper is going to go on this side. I went ahead and I first stitched my other side seam and did my top stitching. As you can see here, I highly recommend doing this side first with your top stitching before you sew the side that has the zipper. For the side that has the zipper, you are only going to sew from the hem all the way up to the notch or wherever your zipper is going to end. For me, I marked my zipper length with a notch, so I went ahead and stitched from the hem all the way to that notch and backstitched a couple times to reinforce it. This is where our zipper is going to go in. I'm going to be putting in an invisible zipper, and I have a special sort of method that I use when I am working with this kind of fabric, so I'll go ahead and show that to you later. But for right now, we need our sides to be sewn so that way we can go ahead and move on and get our hem up and glued and or stitched. Once you have stitched and top stitched all of your seams for your leather skirt, you are going to sew together the lining seams the same exact way. Now let's go ahead and take care of our hem on our skirt. For my skirt, I'm going to be using this fabric tape that you can get at the fabric store that works really well for vinyl. I'll have more information about it in the blog post, but I'm going to be using this to go ahead and press up and set our hem. So to begin, I went ahead and took my pencil and my ruler and marked my hem allowance, which is 1.5 inches from the edge. I marked it here, as you can see, just so that I could have a visual reference of where I'm going to lay my tape down. And if I flip to the right side, you'll see that I went ahead and used masking tape to mark where my fold line is, so that way I can have a clear indication of where I need to fold this hemline up. And if you don't know already, this is also because you only really get one shot with using this kind of a fabric tape, especially when it comes to vinyl. So I need to make sure that I have everything that I need to be able to do this in the first shot. Take my tape here, and I'm going to lay it down so that the tape itself is going underneath my pencil line here. I'm going to do that for the front and the back, and then we'll go ahead and fold this up and get it set in place. I'm going to carefully roll it out like this, making sure that I don't go past my pencil line. And I'm going to break it off here by just tearing it off. So I'm going to set that in place and repeat the same process for the other side, like so. Put my tape off to the side here. So I'm going to peel the paper off like so. And I'm going to just kind of stop here, and I'm going to start folding it up. Go up to my tape line and push down here like so. I'm going to come over to my princess line and make sure that my seams are matching like so. And then you're going to keep moving. Fold up your hem to meet your seam here and finger press into place. You're gonna keep moving and finger press into place, and then continue to the end where I ripped it off here. Fold to meet your tape line and finger press in place. Then you're going to flip over to the other side and start working on that side. Fold up. So now your skirt hem is folded up and glued down, and the amazing thing about this tape is that it bonds upon contact, so you don't have to worry about it having to sit out to dry. And this works really well. This is what this side looks like, and this is what this side will look like. So let's go ahead and sew in our zipper into our skirt. First thing you're going to need is a zipper. I am going to be working with an invisible zipper, as you can see here. And if you don't know what an invisible zipper is, it just means that there are no visible zipper teeth on my zipper. And I went ahead and grabbed a extra long zipper. This just makes the process of inserting this zipper a lot easier. You can choose to work with either a long zipper like this or a zipper that's exactly the length that you need. The other item you're going to need is your skirt, obviously. Right now, I have mine turned right side out. I'm going to flip it inside out. And the first thing you will do, as I mentioned previously, that you should have done already, is sew your seam from the hem all the way up to where your zipper will stop. From the point where your zipper stops all the way up until the top of the waist, you are going to leave that section open because this is where our zipper is going to be inserted. This is my technique for inserting a zipper into leather or vinyl. The only difference between the vinyl and a woven fabric that I usually take into consideration is not basting the opening closed, because I actually do not want to have needle scars in this vinyl, because if you don't know already, the needle scars will not go away. First things first, I am going to simply take my zipper and I'm going to unzip it a little bit so that way I can see where my zipper stop is here. I'm going to put this zipper stop at 1/2 inch below the top edge of my waist or my skirt. So the little plastic piece goes just 1/2 inch below the top edge. So it'll be this edge of your skirt. And you also want to go ever so slightly more than 1/2 inch just to make sure that you don't accidentally hit this zipper stop when you're stitching. So what I'm going to do first is take my clip and just start clipping the zipper onto my edge here. And do this all the way down until you get to the zipper opening or where your seam starts underneath where your zipper ends. Open up the bottom seam allowance here to make it easier. And this is what it'll look like. So you have one side of your zipper in place like this. I have put clips to hold everything in place. And down here where the zipper is going to end and where your seam starts, you just want to make sure that you don't have fabric bunched up down here. You want to make sure that everything is nice, even, and smooth. I'm going to place my fabric underneath the needle. I'm going to make sure that the edge of my zipper tape is butted up against the edge of my raw edge here. And I'm going to just use a very long stitch. I have my stitch length that is 6 right now. I'm going to put my foot down, and you want to make sure that you're hitting around the center of the zipper tape, not too far to the right, not too far to the left. But the idea is we're just holding down our zipper tape so that way it makes putting our permanent stitch in a lot easier. And one more thing, I am actually using my presser foot number 4, which is a narrow zipper foot, which makes it pretty easy to get up and close to the zipper teeth. And I'm just going to stitch all the way down until I get to where our zipper ends. And make sure everything stays nice and smooth and flat. And you can go a little bit past your notch / your stitch line, depending on how you mark the end of your zipper. And once you get to the perfect stopping point, all you're going to do is do a light back stitch and then cut your thread. And this is what it'll look like after you do that. As you can see, you have the zipper tape basted onto your seam like this. What you're going to do now is take your zipper pull and close your zipper. And once you close it, you'll come to the bottom of the zipper. Start placing clips here, making sure that the edge of your zipper tape is up against the raw edge of your vinyl. Like so. And then you want to just kind of come and take a peek and make sure that everything looks even more or less. And as you can see, that looks pretty good. Like that. And once you have that, we can go ahead and place this back under the presser foot and begin basting the other side of the zipper down. So now I am placing the other side of my zipper underneath the foot. Make sure that everything is nice and flat and smooth. And begin stitching. Again, do a light back stitch and work your way all the way up to the top. And as you're approaching your zipper pull, you just kind of want to make sure that that stays clear out of the way. And then you'll continue stitching. You might need to go around the pull, or what you can do is raise your foot and unzip the zipper. And once you have the zipper pull out of the way, continue stitching to the end. And again, do a light back stitch and cut. Alrighty, and this base on the other side of your zipper. So this is what it'll look like. You have both sides basted onto your seam allowance, and then you have, if you have an extra long zipper, you'll just have the extra zipper at the bottom like this. And now we can go ahead and unzip our zipper. So I'm going to reach inside, unzip it. You'll see here that when you unzip your zipper, you're going to need to insert your pull down into the seam where your zipper ends. And you want to pull it as far down as you can, and you're going to take the pull and insert it down into the seam like so. So you'll reach in and pull it out. It might take you a second. And then once you do, it allows you to open the zipper all the way, so that way the zipper pull doesn't get in the way. So now we are going to place this under the needle again, and we're going to make our final stitching, which is going to end up just to the right of the zipper teeth. As you can see here, you'll see a line that kind of resembles a crease to the right. And it's almost like it's underneath the zipper teeth, but we're going to aim to have our stitching be right along that line just to the right of the zipper teeth. And I'm going to move my needle all the way to the left, which will be -5 needle position on my machine. And I'm going to place it back under the machine and stitch as close to the teeth as I can get without stitching on top of them. I want to go back to a regular stitch length and not a basting stitch length, so I'm going to go back down to a 3.0 stitch length and begin sewing. You can see here I am just moving my zipper teeth to the left and just opening them like so, so that way I can get as close to the teeth as I can get. You're going to just keep working your way all the way down the zipper. And as you can see, I'm approaching the bottom of my zipper. I'm just making sure that my seam allowances stay nice and flat and that I'm not getting any tucks underneath. And then once you reach the point where your seam starts, the seam meaning the seam that's underneath your zipper opening, you're just going to stop there, back stitch, and cut your thread. And once you reach the end, and then back stitch and cut your thread. So here is a close-up of what this will look like after you have sewn the first side. As you can see here, this is my basting line from before, and then if I open up my zipper teeth and move them to the left, you can see my stitching is right underneath the teeth where it should be. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and flip my zipper to the other side, position the other side underneath the needle. To get this side started, it's a little bit tricky because you have to pull the zipper teeth open, and then you're going to sink your needle into the fabric first. So with my left hand, I'm going to open my zipper teeth. With my right hand, I'm going to sink my needle into the fabric, making sure that my needle is right next to my zipper teeth like I have been doing before. Sink it all the way down, put your presser foot down, and slowly and carefully start stitching. Take a few back stitches and then continue sewing all the way up to the top. Once you reach the end, back stitch and cut your thread. And now we have sewn on our other side of our zipper. Go ahead and turn your skirt inside out. And then we can go ahead and close our zipper. And the easiest way to get the zipper pull back up through the seam is to go to the wrong side and find the pull like this. Grab it and pull until the zipper starts closing. And once you get up and over the seam and the opening, you'll go back to the right side, find the pull again, and finish zipping it up. And this is what you are left with, a beautiful invisible zipper.